So my Twitter post was,
yeah.
a lot of people
let me find it.
A lot of people are debating legacies after UFC 309, and while there are arguments for Jones due to pure consistency, it's the diversity, creativity, and breadth of Chandler's resume that makes him the GOAT MMA fowler for me. Because that man, it's like this GOAT performances.
Yeah.
That is what Michael Chandler has been
high profile, influential cheating performances.
Yeah, I mean, fuck all the Jones stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you look at Chandler and you are seeing the pinnacle of an art form.
Jones is hardly even trying to eye poke people. He's just scared that they're going to get close to him. So he just jams his hand out there. Like half the time it is actually incidental. He just doesn't know how to maintain distance or defend himself. And he's very scared. Michael Chandler, every single foul, it's on purpose.
Yeah. I mean, and John Jones he's just doing it. He's just like doing MMA stuff.
Yeah.
And doing it largely within the Jake Paul Venn diagram. Where your opponents are some combination of small, terrible, and old.
Right.
But Chandler, like you're just out there and you're just seeing a fucking master at work.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he'll ever top his Sistine Chapel, where he was pouring his nose blood into Dustin Poirier's open mouth.
Well, he just had to clear his nose. It was an accident, Phil.
Yeah. But
that's why that's why he sighted it up like a fucking bomber flying over the target.
Yeah,
we are go for nose blood.
Just the volume of cheating he did in his last fight.
Yeah.
At 38 years old, you have to just off your cap to the man and guard your genitals and eyes.
Yeah. Really chimpanzee fighting style, really. just go for the genitals and the face. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor. With me, as always, Mr. Phil.
Oh.
And, well, Phil, you said last week that the main event of UFC 309, which will be the bulk of our focus on today's episode, felt like watching somebody getting away with a heist.
Yep.
Having now seen UFC 309, I would argue, aren't heists usually sneaky?
Sorry, I had a brief burst of sound from Fight Pass in my ear. What was that?
I said, aren't heists usually sneaky?
Not the best ones. The best ones are the ones you do in front of everyone.
This was like a now you see me style heist.
Yeah, famously the smartest and most intelligent heist film ever made.
This card was as enjoyable as Now You See Me 3, or whichever the last one I watched was that you made me watch, which made me feel like I was insane.
Unfortunately, they haven't released Now You 3 Me.
Damn. What a shame. John Jones fought Stipe Miocic. Please, don't threaten me. John Jones fought Stipe Miocic in the main event of UFC 309. Stipe Miocic had not competed for coming up on 4 years. He had expressed zero interest in fighting. I did start to see some rumblings in the days leading up to the event of people saying, why are we all assuming, like, Jones is old and shitty now too. Why are we all assuming that Stipe is, like, wouldn't Stipe have been a tough matchup for him? And I just had to say, yeah, but I don't believe in Stipe because he's an old man who doesn't care about MMA. And this certainly felt like a performance from an old man who doesn't particularly care about MMA.
Yep. Yeah, this card was bad.
Yeah, it was a miserable experience.
Card looked bad on paper, pretty bad in actuality. And yeah, looked cynical and horrible on paper, felt cynical and horrible in the execution.
Yep.
Nothing about it really made it feel any better. Stipe getting, them talking to Stipe afterwards, and, it's always noticeable whenever you talk to any fighter, when people are like, is this retirement for you?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about this? And Stipe was just like, God, yes, never doing that again.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm done. That's what he said. Very sort of lackadaisically.
Yeah, but not even the slightest inclination that he was like, oh yeah, this has been...
Yeah.
This was a frustrating experience, but it's ignited my competitive drive. I'd love to get back in there and get a win before I leave. The thing which catches almost every fighter.
Right.
He was just like, no. He looked like the most reluctantly dragged back into this out of retirement for a payday person I have literally ever seen.
Yes, truly. Yeah. I imagine that when they dragged John L. Sullivan's ass out of retirement to be the great white hope against Jack Johnson, he probably looked more motivated to fight than Stipe did here.
Yep.
Same kind of thing, but Stipe didn't even hide it. He was like, yeah, those 3.5 years when I wasn't interested in fighting at all, turns out I was right. Bye. Okay. Thanks.
Remember when he was signed in as a full-time firefighter? As retired UFC ex-champion Stipe Miocic?
Yeah.
This year?
Yeah. So... the commission of Jones is great fraud, and the UFC is great fraud. It does seem like they were setting this up for a Tom Aspinall fight. Don't really feel like that fight needed this as setup. Gonna be honest.
No, but the other thing is seeing how well it's worked. Now you've got tons of people talking about how he's the GOAT, and tons of people saying,
"Yep,
look at how Stipe was meant to be this big threat for him.
Yep.
How easily he dealt with him. You can see, people who don't follow the sport particularly closely.
Which is most people. Which is most of the people who buy pay-per-views. That's most of the people, the casuals are really the core demographic that these promotions try to go after. And the fact is, people just don't know how time works. Of course, we had our responses to the Max Holloway thing when we were like, Max might get knocked out. And people were like, he's a young man. Completely unaware of the, decade plus career against the best fighters in the world he had up to that point. Well, I'll tell you, the one combat sports thing that happened this weekend that I got asked about by an acquaintance who is not a fighting fan, it was Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, or Logan Paul. Which of the Pauls?
I think it's Jake.
It was one of the Pauls versus the one and only Mike Tyson. And somebody brought it up, and I said, why do you always bring up only the most loathsome combat sports things? I did not watch that. I have no interest in it. And then somebody else overhearing this conversation said, who fought? And I was like, a YouTuber and a 55-year-old Mike Tyson, a nearly 60-year-old Mike Tyson. And they said, who won? And I'm like, that's the question that the UFC wants people to be asking. Who won? I said, who do you think? And they said, Tyson? He's 60 years old. What are you, people just don't wrap their heads around this. They just don't get it. They just don't think that age affects athletes for some reason, particularly in fighting. I think people have it divorced in their heads from what they normally consider like an athletic endeavor. They think it's like all heart and toughness and whatever. It's like he's 60 fucking years old. Of course he lost to a man who is like 29. And the same people are, the UFC just hammered it into their heads on every opportunity that John Jones is the GOAT and that Stipe Miocic is a test and he's trying to test himself. And people who just don't know that time is a thing, that they themselves will someday die, those people are like, wow, He beat Stipe Miocic. I can't believe it.
Yeah. Someone on Twitter, I think, said to us, weirdly enough, I feel like this Jones-Stipe thing made me feel worse than the Paul Tyson thing.
Yeah.
And I tend to agree, because with this one, as you can see from the reactions, the scam was one which you can't necessarily blame people for falling for. If you fell for the Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson thing, I'm sorry, you're a moron. Like, there's not much else to say. If you're like one of those people who are out there was like, but he looked so good on the mitts, and I don't know why they cut away all the moments of him being on the mitts after 1.5 seconds every time. And
they cut at the part where he clutches his lower back. Yeah.
Yeah. Surely it must have been a fix. You are stupid. But other people who don't watch combat sports with any, might still be suckered into thinking that this was like a genuine, meaningful fight and not a hand-picked man dragged out of the retirement home.
Yeah.
And you can see that in the... And it's also worth saying that, a lot of the... this is something which sort of runs back through combat sports history as a whole, is that people just forget what point fighters were at in their careers and how people felt about it moving up to it at the time. People just look back at the results.
Yeah, totally.
People, and sometimes that gives rise to like magical moments. There's a reason why Hunter S. Thompson slept through Ali versus Foreman, and it was because Foreman was expected to execute him, and why Norman Mailer ended up having to cribble his notes from the other fighters in order to write his book, from the other journalists in order to write his book, because no one was expecting it to be what it was. So it is the unfortunate fact of the matter is that this will go down as, a finish win for John Jones, and it will be like spinning back kick KO when he was still 37 or whatever, and people will look at it and they'll be like, wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just looked at it and it was bad. Like, Stipe looked atrocious.
And
I didn't really think Jones looked...
No, he kind of looked like shit too. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. The evidence of your eyes would go against anything you see on paper about this fight, because Stipe looked dreadful. Like, old, disinterested, slow, everything. Easy to hurt, no takedown defense, like everything was shot. He did not look good remotely. And yet Jones was like still finding ways to just get hit cleanly by him and to do the thing where he would like run straight backwards and then turn his back and run away. And
that sort of two-stage defense of like backing away, sort of batting and clawing at the air in front of you.
Yeah.
And then it's like, is it working? Is it working? Shit, no, run.
And then run. Literally run. Yeah.
The way that Jones, drifts in and out of, looking okay. Like, again, another one of these fighters who is... And this was another point with the Tyson versus Paul thing. Is that if Jones is standing completely stock still, he can look like quite a dangerous, sharp boxer.
Right.
I mean, so occasionally he would throw out like a sharp, dangerous kick, or a punch which would like stun Stipe, and it would look like mechanically okay, like a sharp jab or something, and then he would just run backwards after it had happened. And it was basically enabled by the fact that Stipe was simply standing there in front of him, waiting for things to happen.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, there's someone on Twitter was posting this thing about people were saying we don't have power. They've weirdly adopted the the team sports thing of referring to referring to Jones as we, which is freakish, but it's just this thing where like Stipe and Jones are just standing in front of each other in range, and Jones just punches him in the face with the right hand, and Stipe is just shocked by this.
Yeah,
and it's just like, this looks bad.
Yeah, this is not convincing. This
just looks terrible. It looks like bad MMA, and it looks like Stipe is incredibly shot, and Jones is still the same, for better or for worse, is still the same mix of like insane physical durability and cardio, and smart shot selection, and just dreadful boxing fundamentals.
Yeah.
And that he's always been.
Yep. And he can have a completely washed opponent in front of him and not only sort of get hit by him a surprising amount and look really bad at moments, but also just take fucking forever to get him out of there. Like, Jesus Christ. 3 rounds never felt so long.
Yeah, it's the weird thing is like Jones has had great performances. He's had,
of course,
he's had his second fight against Gustafsson, his second fight against Cormier, his first fight against Cormier for that matter.
Yeah,
like he has had great performances, and this just looked exactly like his fight against OSP. It was just that at this point. Or Anthony Smith, for that matter. It was just at this point, Stipe is a worse fighter than OSP or Anthony Smith.
Yeah, and I think what you can look at that as is, here's Jones against a big guy. I wrote about last week, just before the event, really. If you do want to check it out, it's still relevant. If you want to go to my go to facepunching.substack.com. And I was very pleased with my title, Phil. I titled it, "Hey, John Jones, are you still there?" Nice little reference for the old heads. And it was about his fight with Dominic Reyes. And in it, I did talk about Jones aging, and undeniably he has aged too. It's part of the reason he didn't look good. But I tried to also get at the fact that there is a motivated John Jones, and there's a John Jones who's over it. And you can see the difference. The John Jones who fought Alexander Gustafsson the first time was famously over it. He had been champ for like 2 years. Everybody, including all of us in the media, everything, were overlooking Gustafsson entirely. And Jones was right in lockstep with that point of view. He didn't train. He was partying. He was like doing cocaine and shit. He had no regard whatsoever for Gustafsson. And that's why that performance looks so bad. Why it is entirely down to Jones's toughness and stamina and will to win that he wins that fight at all. The rematch with Gustafsson, which you mentioned, is actually a very good Jones performance, which I don't think I really recognized when it happened at the time in that way, but viewing it in the context of, let's take all the fights throughout his career where Jones has fight somebody who doesn't need a footstool to look him in the eye. Those are universally his either toughest or least convincing performances. Whether it's OSP, Smith, Gustafsson, Reyes, like those are all the guys that make him look human and kind of like flighty and scared and indecisive. And you can see that when Jones gives a shit, the second Gustafsson fight, he looks great. He's got good boxing footwork. I mean, it's right there next to the second Daniel Cormier fight, which is characterized by many of the same things. So maybe it was just a phase in Jones' career or whatever. But at that point, he was able to outmaneuver Alexander Gustafsson from range with genuinely pretty good footwork. He was able to strike moving backwards through much of that fight. And It was one of the few times I have ever seen Jon Jones recognize that when an opponent is coming after him, he can basically stop retreating and create a clinch whenever he wants. Which is a really baffling aspect of the Jones freaking out against guys his size thing, is that, like Dominic Reyes, for example, managed to put him against the fence and hit him and make him do the turning his back and running away thing. And not once did he think, I'm going to grab out and clinch this dude while he's trying to close in on me. This is the weird disconnect that has almost always existed in Jones's game. But against Gustafsson, he prepared it. And that was a fight where he was like thwarting his pressure with takedown attempts and clinches. Very well chosen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the two things you have to understand is that the three things you have to understand is that there are big guys that just make Jones uncomfortable, that make him a lot less decisive and more hesitant at long range, and also make him bring out his worst defensive reactions. The second thing is that Jones is capable of fighting well against these guys when he bothers to. And therefore, the third thing, the conclusion, is that Jones himself knows that this was a fucking fraud because he didn't try or prepare for Stipe Miocic. I think it's very clear he didn't give a shit about this fight because despite everything he said, he knows it's a sham. He knows Stipe was brought in to lose. And so he just knew he was going to win. He was right.
I mean, there's also just very strongly the argument that he's just washed now, and he can no longer do surprising things.
But, he was motivated for the Cyril Gahn fight. And I know that was a huge indictment of Cyril Gahn, more than it was a celebration of Jones. But at the very least, he made all the right decisions against Cyril Gahn. And it was a very pointed approach.
I mean, he made all the right decisions in the first,
Of course, yeah. It's short.
He did the same thing against Stipe here, where he...
That's true. He got that quick Osotogari.
Yeah, he got the quick takedown, and it just didn't instantly end the fight.
That's true.
So yeah, I mean, I've absolutely no doubt that if that Gahn fight hadn't been instantly finished, that it would have turned into a miserable.
That Gahn might have managed to make Jones look like shit.
Gahn probably would have beaten him.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's possible.
It's the problem is that like the mistake many of us made was in thinking like, does Cyril Gahn have better not just pound for pound but absolute takedown defense than Thiago Santos, a man who got ruined by? Did he get ruined by? Incredibly unathletic grappler. Back at middleweight. Who was it?
Spicely.
Eric Spicely, yeah. Like, does Cyril Gahn have better absolute grappling than Thiago Santos? As it turns out,
no.
The answer was no.
The answer was no.
Not even in a pound-for-pound sense.
Yeah,
in an absolute sense, he's much worse.
I think also maybe Jones, I don't remember it, so I might be wrong about this, but it's quite possible that he couldn't even be bothered to try the wrestling at the time he fought Thiago Santos. Did he test his takedown defense at all?
I think so. He definitely did against Reyes, and it didn't work at all.
Yeah, he did against Reyes. Yeah. So, it's...
But yeah, I think there's an idea that, like, Jones can maybe just do things in bursts now, and other than that, he's just going to be OSP level Jones.
Yeah, he's just a guy who just stands there picking away, and hopefully you collapse.
Yeah. And the worst and bleakest thing about the Jon Jones heist is the sneaking feeling that it's not even necessary. Because the obvious thing is that, like, Jones is ducking Tom Aspinall, who's incredibly violent and the actual heavyweight champion, and so on and so forth.
He's still going to create a problem around that, by the way. Like, he is going to ask for so much money from the UFC. They're going to quickly realize that him not being Ngannou does not make him a guy they like. Yeah.
And also, the one thing the UFC hates, even though they are still, for whatever reason, presumably because of the Ngannou thing, backing him to the hill, they do not like having power plays run on them at all.
Well, Jones is going to try.
The thing is that, like, even if he fought Tom Aspinall, would I confidently pick Tom Aspinall?
That's what I said.
Someone whose main thing is obliterating people in one round, who has literally never gone deep into fights.
That's what I said. He could beat Aspinall
at any point in his UFC career against the most unkillable fighter we've ever seen.
Yeah, he could beat Aspinall and Ngannou both tomorrow, for all I know. He is a great fighter, and these guys are heavyweights.
Yes.
They have no idea how shitty they are. They're heavyweights. Look how the fucking Gon fight went. Gon took Ngannou to the bitter end. Like,
yep.
That's
one incredibly stupid decision that lost him that fight.
Yeah. It was tooth and nail. And also a pretty bad fight where both guys looked like shit for most of the time. Yeah, I said the same thing.
Ngannou
Jones
is probably himself. The other thing about Jones is that it's not just his in-cage durability. We've talked a lot of the time about how, you'll get fighters who are incredibly tough, but bits just fall off them.
Right.
Like,
Pettis.
Anthony Pettis or whatever.
Yeah.
Or to an extent, Sean O'Malley. But John Jones is also someone who has just been fucking blessed. Is so infrequently gotten injured.
He had his first major injury that I know of this year, actually. He had a shoulder surgery.
Yeah. He's just starting to get this stuff so deep into his career.
Yeah.
That he is simply able to... He's simply able to have people age past him.
Yep.
Entirely possible that by this point, Ngannou has already aged past him by a significant measure.
And all he has to do against heavyweights as a rule is survive and outlast them, which are two things John Jones has always been capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Those are poison for heavyweights.
The darkest thing about this whole thing is that the scam is in fact unnecessary.
Yeah, it's simply that Jones doesn't want it. He doesn't want to take the risk. He does not like the idea of fighting somebody that he regards as bigger, stronger, more dangerous than him. He does not want to do it.
Yep.
That's why this happened.
Article, he is, we think of him as this, dominant physical force because he is. But he is, to all intents and purposes, the runt of the litter.
Yeah, in his family.
He is.
Yeah.
In his family,
he's the scrawny one.
As I said before, he was like, in one of my articles, he's like, Superman doesn't necessarily have to be, 6 foot tall and chiseled and Clark Kent and so on. The puniest, most pathetic Kryptonian could have been sent over to Earth.
Yes.
And he still would have been able to fucking fly and...
That would have been sick, actually.
Freeze things with his breath and...
That would have been sick. Superman's 4.5 feet tall.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. just a complete Kryptonian dweeb would still crush, any conception of what humanity is. And that's essentially what John Jones is. He is Raditz from Dragon Ball Z. He is like the one where all the other Saiyans are like, that guy,
shut up, Raditz.
Shitty.
Yeah. Yeah, John Jones can be the UFC champion for 10 years and go home and have no choice about letting his big brother sit on him. You know what I mean? He can't stop it from happening for all his skill and his toughness and everything. But that is it.
He desperately doesn't want that to happen again. Yeah.
That's it. He doesn't want to take the risk. He chose Stipe deliberately, and he chose Gon in a very calculated decision as the guy he thought likeliest victim of a surprising wrestling game plan.
Mm-hmm.
He chose these opponents, and it's why despite the UFC, who've now decided they love John Jones because he isn't Ngannou, they begged his pathetic ass for years to fight Ngannou, and he refused. He hardly mentioned Ngannou's name during that time. Same as he's been doing to Aspinall now. And as I believe I said in the article, a comparison of the silhouettes of Tom Aspinall and Francis Ngannou might be some clue as to John's motivations regarding his careful charting of this division.
Yeah. Have you seen that Dana is now mad because this performance has not now resulted in everyone coronating John Jones as once again the pound for pound number one?
Oh no. Why do they care?
I don't know. I mean, it's just, I guess it's at some point you just get rich enough that the incredibly stupid stuff starts to have meaning to you because you literally can't control it.
Yeah.
You're like, I've got to get angry about something.
Yeah.
But yeah, even then, the fact that he even moved up a spot it's not enough. Is also repulsive.
So wait, who is pound for pound number 1? Islam?
Okay. Yeah. I think he overtook whoever was number 2, which I'm guessing is Saburia?
You think that, but maybe not. The top pound for pound rankings are moronic and have been for their entirety of their existence.
Yeah. Oh no, it's Pereira. It's going to be Pereira, isn't it? Of course.
Yeah, he's also been talking
about
fighting.
What was I thinking of?
Pereira. And why do you think he's gunning for Pereira instead of Aspinall? It must be because he
doesn't understand how Pereira's size magic works.
Well, that's true. He doesn't realize that he's going to go to a weigh-in and then step into the cage against a man who's 3 feet taller than he was on the scale the day before.
Exactly.
What the fuck?
He doesn't realize that all Pereira's size is not a number. It is simply It is simply a multiplicative factor.
That's right.
Of like
1.3
of whoever he's standing next to. You're like,
man,
he's bigger than that guy.
Pereira is the wimpy, disabled Krypton from his species. He is he has power to be so much more. He's like the Ant-Man of his planet. And this is his smallest form. This is as small as he can go. On Pereira's home planet, this is as small as you need to be to crawl inside of like an insect hive.
Yep. Planet of the Titans.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's the same shit. Like, why does he want to fight Pereira? It's because he thinks Pereira can't wrestle. That's it.
Yep.
He's like, this guy's big and scary. If I had thought he had any wrestling game at all to stop me, I would have zero desire in fighting him. But I think Tom Aspinall does, and I think Pereira doesn't. So guess who I want to fight? It's pathetic.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was the conclusion of UFC 309. A very dispiriting card with just a really, not to mention, this fucking pay-per-view was so full of Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Don Jr., who had to sit at the kids' table as usual, which I always find very funny. Did you watch the thing where Donald Trump did commentary for that awful night of exhibition old man execution fights? I think it was Evander Holyfield fought on that night. He might have fought Vitor Belfort.
Oh, was that the thing where Holyfield got knocked out by Belfort? Yeah.
I think that was that.
Oh my God.
And Donald Trump was there doing commentary, and JDS was there. And so it was like a 3-man booth. Also, I believe Oscar De La Hoya showed up coked out of his fucking mind and did some ranting for about 20 straight minutes on that broadcast. Great night. And, but what I remember most, the indelible impression it left in me, is an image of Donald Trump leaning over eagerly, trying to gain the approval and affection of Junior Dos Santos, while his son sat there, literally having his back turned to him, just trying to get his attention and having to constantly stick his hand in his mouth because he was just, people just talking over him. He was like Mr. Collins in Pride and Prejudice.
Amazing.
So I enjoyed that much, but my God, every fucking fighter having to go over and be like, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Sir. It's such an honor." They're so pathetic, MMA fighters. I'm sort of coming around to these motherfuckers don't deserve better pay. They don't want it. They like licking ass. That's what they like. They like a fucking strongman daddy to tell them what to do. They don't fucking deserve to be paid better. They're pathetic. These are despicable, pathetic little people. People like John Jones, who does his little fucking dance after he beats up an old man. Which, by the way, Phil, that was not the Donald Trump dance. The Donald Trump dance, famously, is jacking off 2 guys at once. John Jones's dance, if anything, was skiing, perhaps to a location where you're going to jack off 2 guys at once. But it was not
too much hips. Is this what you're saying?
Too much hips. Well, and the hand position was all wrong. It was just a really lazy attempt to kiss the man's ass. But man, this card was just full of it. It just added an extra layer of like, what the fuck?
Slime.
Yeah, what the fuck am I watching? That there's like 30 minutes of this broadcaster reserved for some victory lap political rally, and every one of these fighters who are all being fucked up the ass by Dana White, Donald Trump's best buddy, on a daily basis are like, "Ooh, I love you, sir. It's such an honor to fight before you. I am beneath your notice." They're so pathetic, dude. God, have some fucking self-respect, you dogs. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I was fast-forwarding through that shit, I'm not gonna lie.
I watched it live.
I figured out that I was clicking on the... I was watching it the next day, and I was clicking on the start or fight buttons, which now work on the thing that I use.
Nice.
And yeah, and then at the instant any of the fights ended, apart from the main event, I was just like, hell no. Hell no, I don't want to hear what. Well, I think I listened to some Michael Chandler.
Yeah, well, you got to.
On Charles Oliveira and so on.
Michael Chandler and
what crazy things he said.
Michael Chandler, whose quote, I believe, after Joe Rogan came over to fillet him for losing 4 rounds, bravely, he came over and he said, fuck, what was the quote? It was nonsensical. He said, "All I know how to do is throw American badass ... caution to the wind." All I know how to do is throw American badass caution to the wind.
Throwing ass is a thing.
But what did he mean? He didn't know what he was saying, but the crowd just like hooted and drooled on themselves.
These are words which I know are cool.
He just said American. He really put the emphasis on it, and the crowd cheered, and then he kind of lost his train of thought.
I don't think they listen to the content of things very
No,
much.
What a disgraceful fucking event. Just all across the board. But that was just the main event. Let's take a break. When we come back, more on Michael Chandler, the slimiest motherfucker in all of mixed martial arts, and his fight with Charles Oliveira. Maybe you can tell me a bit about Tyson versus Paul, which it sounds like you watched. I know I didn't.
Yeah.
Sure. So we'll wrap that in. It'll fit nicely, snugly into the theme of the UFC 309. And then later on, I think we're going to try to talk a little bit about Figueiredo versus Jan, a great main event happening next week. But Chandler Oliveira 2 after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Because I cannot imagine... Can you imagine, like... There's no politician I like as much as these fucking freaks like Donald Trump.
None. And like, nor could there be, because I
Bernie Sanders is probably the politician that I think I like the most.
Yeah. And I still fundamentally distrust Bernie Sanders as a politician.
Well, yeah, but also I just like the idea of just being like, sir,
yeah,
fucking honor.
That's
fucking weird.
That's the thing. That's why
the idea that this is the independent, this is the sort of independent, heroic. To fucking suck off this rich broad. So creepy.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking of fighter pay when this shit happened. I was like, oh my God. Like they like this.
Yep.
They're honored. They can't fucking wait to just have some strongman tell them what to do, and they want to obey. These people aren't gonna fucking unionize.
A strongman in the most strongman in the most like literalist but not literal sense of the word. Like
yes. But they're not going to fucking unionize. They like being told what to do. MMA fighters are like fundamentally authoritarian.
Yep.
They like to have somebody in charge who makes their decisions for them. So fuck them.
Yep. Like, you know what a pussy would do? You know what a pussy would do?
The pussy would stand up for himself.
Yeah.
A real man would fucking suck off a fucking geriatric.
Yep.
Because he makes the libs mad. Pathetic.
Yep. Ugh.
Any cult of personality is pathetic, but I mean, it just takes it to another level. The fact that the whole broadcast
is particularly pitiful.
I mean, my God, have some fucking dignity.
Ugh.
I can't think of a single human being who has ever existed that I would treat that way. And I'm not saying I'm
fucking Donald Trump.
Of course not, but I'm not saying I'm incapable of being starstruck or awed by a great person. Great people do and have existed, but I can't think of a single fucking person I would treat with that level of just shameless deference, of just like abasing myself, of obeisance. It is so groveling. They're groveling. I mean, my God. Look at yourself in the mirror.
Maybe Matt Levine.
I don't know who that is.
Levine, but that's the only person. He's a former lawyer and derivatives reconstructor. Person who worked on derivatives reconstruction for Goldman Sachs.
That's the guy that you'd want to fillet.
Yeah, he's the coolest person in the world.
I have heroes. I'd love to meet Tolkien. But I'd love to have a conversation with Tolkien. I'd love to try to get inside his head.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to...
How can I please you, sir? Can I bring you a glass of wine? You know what I mean? Like, Jesus Christ. He's not my dad. I don't treat my dad that well. All right, Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira, they fought again. There wasn't any particular reason for it to happen. Now that it has happened, I suppose I'm happier about it than anything else that took place on this card. But I don't feel anymore that it was a necessary fight. And it was also not as good as the first fight, which didn't help this card. I mean, it was easily the best, most exciting thing on this card.
Yep.
And it was almost entirely one-sided. And Michael Chandler, the gulf between Michael Chandler's longing to win, which is undeniable, and his equally profound inability to do so at the high level, leads him to be one of the grimiest, most cheating-prone fighters at this level in all of MMA. Yep. Perhaps, as you said, Phil, even superseding John Jones in his artistry for fouling his opponents.
Yeah, I mean, because John Jones, he's done a bunch of stuff. He's poked a million eyeballs and he's grabbed fences and so on. But just like the pure creativity of Michael Chandler, the famous, wrenching open Dustin Poirier's mouth to fill it with nose blood is still one of the most sensational fouls I've ever seen. This fight just opens it up with an eye poke, just for a fence grab shortly afterwards, and then just like caps it all with one of the bongo barrage of punches to the back of the fucking head.
Directly to the back of the head. About which Keith Peterson didn't say...
So many.
Keith Peterson didn't say a fucking word about that.
Smelling of booze and cigarettes again, was he?
Yeah, he must have been. Maybe Dominic Cruz was right. Dominic Cruz was right. No, he did the same shit in the Poirier fight. He blew his clotted nose blood into Poirier's mouth. He fish hooked him in an attempt to choke him out, and he hit him directly in the back of the head in a very similar position like 10 times in a row. It was the same shit.
Yep.
And he just gets away with it.
Yep. I think it's basically he's on the Mount Rushmore of MMA foulers. It's him, it's John Jones, Usman Palhares maybe, as people have been offering. Cowboy Oliveira, also a great one.
Yeah.
Fence grabs and eye pokes and so so on and so forth. The only other one I can think of who didn't get as much, people didn't mention in the in when I put this out there on Twitter, Gilbert Eiffel.
Gilbert Eiffel. He takes it even beyond. I mean, that man knocked out a referee. That's not even in the rule book. It's so that crosses. Gilbert Eiffel was crossing lines they didn't bother to draw because they didn't think anyone would ever act this way. Yeah, he is a god. He's like a mythical ancestor of the modern foul perpetrators.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that he's
the Achilles.
He is like but he's like Pal Harris in that I don't know whether there should be like two categories. Is that like there's people who have fouled and gotten away with it, and then there's people who have been so fucking outrageous that they actually lost fights.
Yeah, I think the other thing with Chandler too, though, is that that separates it from Jones. Jones knows he's full of shit, Jones doesn't buy his own bullshit. Jones doesn't think he's like a role model. Not really. And he doesn't think he's a good man. He knows he likes hurting people, and he has no regard for the feelings of others. Deep inside, John Jones knows this, that he's lying to the world. Michael Chandler truly believes that he is like #1 King Patriot American hero.
Yep.
He thinks he is like the embodiment of the striving, hustle, grind set American existence. He thinks that's him. Yeah. And then he's out here, sort of flailing around and mostly just losing rounds to other good fighters in the sport. I mean, this man has lost, what is it, like 4 or 5 now in the last 5 fights? He loses to all the good fighters. And he cheats when he realizes he's going to lose to them.
And he's got 2 wins in the UFC, right? He's got Dan Hooker and
Tony Ferguson.
Tony Ferguson.
Yeah. But I think his last 5 fights, it's this. Before this was Poirier. Then it was Ferguson. And before that was Gaethje, maybe. And I think he lost to another one, too. I can't remember it all now. Oh, Oliveira, the other time.
Yep.
And yeah, but he believes his bullshit. He thinks he's like a hero and a role model and somebody who should be admired. And he's a very more so than Jones, a very PR focus group kind of cultivated personality. Like you can go and look for Michael Chandler controversy. He's not out there popping off about things. He knows where the line is on how to present himself. But when it's in fights and it really comes down to it, he is the dirtiest motherfucker who has ever lived. He will do anything to win.
Yep.
And, this was another great example of that. Charles Oliveira, by the way, since we did talk about it, the one fighter on the entire card who did not seem to give a fuck that Donald Trump was there. It made me love him more than I ever have before.
Yes.
Not because I think I can't possibly feel affection for somebody who supports that man, but because of the overall pathetic nature of the groveling we were talking about. Charles Oliveira was like, oh, that's a guy.
Yep.
Kudos, Chucky. You're right. That is merely another guy. And you don't have to lick his fucking ballsack on public TV.
Yes. Deeply shameful. I hate politicians.
Yeah.
Apart from this one, I love him so much.
I wish he was my dad. I wish he would kiss me. Yeah.
This was even aside from the fouling, this was a dreadful performance from Chandler by and large.
Horrible. Yeah. Horrible.
Obvious reason, which is that we've, talked many times about how he tries to execute good game plans too hard.
Yep.
And he'd clearly just decided, you know what I'm going to do? 5 rounds. I'm going to save my energy.
Mm-hmm. Your Romero style, baby.
Exactly yes.
I'm going to gas out later.
Yep. But also, he's a really bad defensive fighter.
He is dreadful. Yeah, because I've been writing about him and I've been trying to collect a list of his fouls. I have I have rewatched a bunch of Michael Chandler fights, and as you pointed out last week, and as everyone must point out, and this is a point in his favor over John Jones, they're all great fights.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no exceptions. They are all thrilling fights. They're largely thrilling because of the exciting ways Michael Chandler finds to get executed by his opponents, but he doesn't go quietly into that good night. The man is a warrior. There's no doubt about that. But that really jumped out at me in that process, is that Michael Chandler does not know what striking defense is. He can leap out of range. That's the only thing he has. He can pull his leg back from a kick. He can hop back out of range. That is all he knows, which is why the fights turn around so suddenly when he does get tired. Because that's when he doesn't have the energy to jump around, and he just has to stand there on the end of range, and he just gets hit by everything that comes his way. And then we have this fun inversion where by saving his energy, he just puts himself into the position of standing around much earlier and for most of the fight. And it turns out the defense isn't any better when he's fresh if he's just going to fucking corner himself.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that this was almost the pay that worked award for terrible game plans that work regardless.
Would have been a shoo-in.
I mean, imagine if he'd actually knocked out Charles Oliveira. People would have been like, what a genius approach that was.
Yeah.
But it was the stupid, like, even given the fact that it almost works, it was so fucking stupid. Like, can you possibly think of a dumber fighter to do that to than Charles Oliveira?
I know. I'll stand around on the edge of his reach for 20 minutes and do nothing. Yeah.
Like, is there one?
I don't
Max
know.
Holloway, maybe?
Holloway, yeah. Somebody like that.
I can't. Someone like Max Holloway maybe is the only one I could think of. But even then, you're not opening yourself up to the takedowns. You're not opening yourself up to the sheer firepower.
Yeah.
And you're not talking about someone who is historically vulnerable in the first round to getting dropped.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's a dumber fight. There's a worse fighter I can think of off the top of my head who would be.
I mean,
it would be stupid to try, unless you're talking, people on the only people I can think of who are would be stupider are people on the sort of Gerald Meerschaert and Julian Erosa type tips. But even then, like, in a weird way, Charles Oliveira kind of is one of those guys.
Yeah, he's just the elite athletic version of those guys.
Yeah, where it's super possible to just smoke him in round one, and if you don't, you're in for an utterly miserable time.
Yep.
This was so dumb.
Incredibly dumb. Yeah. Oh, there was something I was going to say on that point, but it's gone. It's gone. This fight it's sandblasted my brain.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I can say is I don't know what they do with Jerky Olives now.
Yeah,
they
right.
Well,
that's
the Islam rematch.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, what else?
As well.
And who else is there for Islam? They may as well do it. Yeah, I'd be happy to see that again compared to anything else.
I mean, they've got to do. They've still got to do. What's it called? Sarukian.
Oh yeah, of course.
And for Chandler, it does have to be. At this point, it has to be Paddy Pimblett, right? Nowhere for him to go. He's not getting fucking Conor McGregor.
We know he's not getting McGregor.
Get time to get the next best thing.
He still believes that. By the way, he really still thinks it's going to happen.
Bless him.
Yeah, bless his heart. He really thinks Conor McGregor is gonna put the red panties on him with his own two hands. Ain't gonna happen, pal.
I mean, this is the thing: is that the very slender chance that McGregor ever came back, I think it would be much more likely if people ignored and forgot him.
Mm.
People that acted like he didn't exist. But the fact that everyone, every time someone calls him out or begs him for a fight, he's like, oh yeah, I'm still the big man out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, would have been a power move for Chandler to come out there and say, like, Charles Oliveira is a better fighter than Conor McGregor. I don't give a fuck about Conor McGregor anymore.
Mm-hmm. That would be much more likely to. It'd just be like, I want Paddy Pimblett. He's a better fighter than Conor McGregor now.
You really should have said that. The UFC might have gone along with it. Look what they did with the Stipe Jones fight. They would have hyped that up if Paddy would have taken that fight, which he wouldn't.
So I mean, neither of them have anywhere they can go at this point, right? Pimblett, probably can't do much better than Bobby Green and have a chance of winning, but Chandler sucks and looks like he might actually be sucking like worse now.
Yeah,
and he can't go anywhere either because he's just lost most of his relevant fights.
Yep.
So it is time for Pimblett Chandler, and please do it in like the most pro USA place possible, so we can get some real USA chance as Michael Chandler presumably like pulls one of Paddy Pimblett's eyeballs out of his skull. USA, USA, USA.
Yeah. Alternatively, do it in the UK. Michael Chandler could just be roaring, just swirling around in Paddy Pimblett's blood in a silent arena. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, overall, it was an absolutely dreadful.
Gives a motivational speech about like pushing yourself forward with like the tatters of what remains of Paddy Pimblett's face hanging from his teeth.
He has a scrap of Paddy Pimblett's cheek, hanging out of his mouth, and he says, "Hey, hang in there, England." Thanks, Mike. Overall, an incredibly dreadful performance from Chandler. He was passive. He was defensive without having any defensive skill. He got fucked up by Charles Oliveira's low kicks, particularly the straight kicks to the knee. They did some real damage to Chandler in this fight. And, just a sort of an embarrassing performance, I guess.
Yeah, although he did go for it in the...
He did go for it.
Round,
I mean,
then,
this is the thing with Chandler.
Like, if you'd done that in the first round, you might have won.
Yeah, you still would have lost if you didn't win, but you might have actually won if you did that early.
Yes. It was your only chance.
Pretty
Whatever
much.
your chance was, it wasn't wait until this incredibly potent... Use my incredible defense against one of the most offensively potent glass cannons MMA has ever seen.
Yeah, it did really give us a chance to see all of Oliveira's like aggressive counterpunching game in full color. Because like Charles Oliveira's defense was bad too. Every single round, Chandler would nail him with a tremendously hard, clean shot. But when we
also know that.
Yeah, we know that, of course. And when he did have Chandler cornered, we got to see the parts of Oliveira's defense that work, like the pull counters, the like same time cross counter stuff, taking his head offline, putting the combinations together. Just Chandler being a guy who can like pretty much only throw one fully committed punch at a time. And a guy who has no positional understanding outside of backing the other guy up to the fence, and that's where you can hit him. Just to see him put himself in a position where he's cornered, getting hit at will, and completely failing to surprise. In fact, getting punished every time he tries to surprise Oliveira with a punch. I suppose it was a little satisfying.
Yep.
Tell me about Paul Tyson. You watched that? First of all, why?
I have Netflix.
So
I don't
why?
watch it live. I'm not.
You watched it later? That's almost worse. You weren't even like part of the event atmosphere. You were just casually checking it out. That's worse.
I was like, this is going to be short. I turned it on. It was like the entire event was just like longer than a UFC event, I think. It was like 7 hours or something insane. So I watched it. People seem to think this was really bad, and I'm going to say I think this was about as good as it possibly could have been. Which is to say that Mike Tyson looked like he might be trying something for about a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a full round. Maybe like a minute and a half in the first round, and then like a minute in the second one, then like 30 seconds, and decreasing every round.
Yeah.
and Jake Paul started jabbing him up and then got too scared to finish him off.
Wow.
And that was kind of what happened. And I think that people who were expecting anything better from this, were absolutely insane. Because in the end, there were some moments where Tyson landed on him, but it wasn't what I was actually expecting, which was after you'd seen things like Belfort versus Holyfield, or the other one, Anthony Pettis beating Roy Jones Jr.
Oh, God. Did that happen?
I'm pretty sure it did, yeah.
The fuck?
Like, a actual prime athlete, even if he's a YouTuber, who's been doing boxing for, like, at a reasonable level, even if it's against a man as old and as... Frankly, like, we're not talking fucking Bernard Hopkins here either.
Yeah, right.
It's not like everyone was like, oh my god, look at Mike Tyson's incredible longevity.
Right. Famously not a Mike Tyson quality.
Yes.
And also famously
like,
not a guy...
no longer a realistic contender before Jake Paul was born.
And equally famously not a guy who could, like... You like you said, Bernard Hopkins, you might expect a certain kind of fighter to be able to outfox a younger, more headstrong fighter at that age. It's possible. Mike Tyson was a destroyer.
Yes.
He was an annihilator. He was a Terminator. He was not out there using his deft positional understanding and defense to wear people out. So, well, that's why I didn't watch it, because of all the things you just said.
I just want people to accept this is about as good as it could have been.
That sounds reasonable to me, yeah.
No, you are incorrect, because I think Mike Tyson could have knocked him out. A, you are wrong.
Yeah.
But B, even if you were, you must listen to the logic of the glue factory, because if that had happened, it would have encouraged A, Mike Tyson, and B, tons of other washed people who shouldn't be anywhere near a fucking ring or a cage to get back in there and try it against people who would smoke them.
I think you need... Yeah, go on.
And frankly, like, I'm still of the opinion in many things of play stupid fucking games, win stupid fucking prizes. And I honestly don't think that Mike Tyson should have been rewarded for taking this incredibly stupid, greedy fight with getting a fluke KO.
You need, like, for fight fans, you need, like, what's the thing they do in Israel where, like, Jews from around the world can go do, like, a week-long trip there where, like, a Ukrainian prostitute tries to convince them to become Israeli citizens?
Oh,
what's that called?
Yeah, I know what it is, but I can't remember what the name is.
It's like Homelander, possibly.
Yes.
You need to do a Homelander program for the Glue Factory where anyone who expresses any interest in combat sports at some point, they can have a free tour of the Glue Factory and see all the desiccated corpses of great fighters of yesteryear and learn an important lesson that time is real, fighters age, and once you're 40 years old, you can't beat young fighters anymore, even if you were so much better than them in your prime.
And everyone who was disappointed after this, you are a dumb fucking mark. There's not that much else to say about it.
Yeah. Yeah, this is an aggressive episode of Heavy Hands. A lot of shit being talked on this episode.
It was a dark weekend.
Yeah, it was. Dark time in combat sports and in the world. And on that note, let's take a break. When we come back, bantamweights. And maybe we'll pick up some of the other scraps from UFC 309 too. Maybe there'll be a little bonus episode of this if we find some stuff to talk about. But we're definitely going to talk about Figgy versus Jan after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Petr Yan versus Deiveson Figueiredo. That is the matchup scheduled to headline this coming weekend's China Fight Night card. The UFC is headed to Macau. And they are taking with them a pretty damn good main card overall, I would have to say, which is supported by a sea of Asian fighters that I mostly know nothing about. Though I'd better know something about them by tomorrow when I've got to talk about this whole fucking card with Zane Simon. You just got a glimpse into the rest of... You just got a glimpse at the rest of my evening, Phil.
You're going to be an expert on Baigeng Yisi?
Yeah.
And Nyamjagal Tumendembarai.
Yep. Nyamjagal Tumendembarai. I can't wait to hear Zane pronounce that one.
Oh, that's going to be the main entertainment of it.
That's what I'm really looking forward to.
It's going to be what gets you through the tape study.
Pretty much, yeah. Anyway, the main card is quite solid. And the main event in particular, Petr Yan, Deiveson Figueiredo, two former champions. And I believe a matchup that many of us kind of asked for after Figueiredo's win over Garbrandt. We thought it was a very sensible fight to make, and they've made it. No complaints.
Yeah. And a really... Not one which I think is like super difficult to analyze in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But one where I'm not really sure where either of because I think we were very familiar with both of these guys in terms of their game.
Yeah.
But they are like physically. I'm still not sure. I mean, and weirdly enough, even considering that this is Young, the person with the one of the most publicized downfalls outside of Cody Garbrandt, whilst never actually looking like particularly bad.
Yep.
He is, for me, more the known factor than Figueiredo is.
Yeah, I agree. But I still have many. It doesn't really help me feel more confident in Petr Yan. I mean, I just rewatched his fight with Song Yadong, and the man is going through it in that fight. You can see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very evident, and I mean, he just straight up loses the first round. He's like incredibly hypersensitive to every suggestion of a takedown attempt. The man is experiencing Merab Dvalishvili related trauma throughout the entirety of that fight with Song Yadong. And I don't think I thought it was a wonderful bounce back performance, and I was personally very happy to see that, to see Yan sort of find it over the course of 3 rounds. But it was still pretty uncertain and hesitant, and he did have to find it. It wasn't apparent to him at first how he was supposed to fight Song Yadong. It was clearly not the Petr Yan. So,
yeah.
While I agree, it doesn't really make me feel particularly confident in Yan as a fighter. I still really don't know where he's at. And I suspect will probably never be at the place he was when he won the title in terms of like just raw confidence.
Yeah. I think he's been summarily had the idea that he is the best fighter in the world.
Yeah.
Has been removed from him by Merab.
Squeezed out of him like a tube of toothpaste.
We mentioned, about how when he was talking about Sean O'Malley, he was like, I think O'Malley's going to win. And then I'm going to get back to him. He knows he didn't beat me. And it's like, you are not talking about Merab at all. And we know why you're not talking about Merab.
Yeah.
Because you can't.
Just taking it as a given that guy, Merab will probably, I don't know, die.
Yeah. Something about him just makes me not want to think about him at all. And makes me wake up crying sometimes.
Something about Merab Dvalishvili, my memory of that fight is is right there next to that time I walked into the Catholic Church at 7 years old, and then I don't remember the rest of the weekend. Somehow Marab is right in that neighborhood. I just can't think about it.
Oh.
That's a little too dark. Sorry. It's the whole tone of the episode. You know, I'm getting high on my own supply of vitriol and hatred here.
But yeah, so as much as like Jan has sort of fluctuated in terms of his confidence, I think.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
His basic approach and game plan has not varied.
Right.
Meanwhile, like Figueiredo is a very inexplicable man in many ways.
Yes.
Because we're talking someone who looked like he was deteriorating somewhat. Not a huge amount, but, you know, deteriorating a little bit at flyweight. And then has moved to bantamweight and has adjusted somehow successfully by lowering his pace and going for his wrestling more.
Yeah. Incredibly just backwards based on everything we think we know about weight class changes, right?
Mm-hmm. And he has now become, I mean, I guess it makes sense as him, he's like now feels that he can use his increased speed as like to hit counter takedowns on people as well as counters, and he's confident that his power is still translating, which it obviously is because he's the first person to knock down Chito Vera.
Mm-hmm.
But is this game plan going to work on Petr Yan? I have to think that the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
You know, sporadic low kicks and counter punches definitely worked for Jimmy Rivera to at least some extent against Petr Yan.
Petr Yan
him into exchange. I mean,
Petr Yan had or Jimmy Rivera had a pretty masterful all-round counter-punching performance against Petr Yan, though. That was just part of it. He was really like
exactly
out-positioning, beating Yan to the punch, defending his shots and returning fire. Like, that was a comprehensively good striking performance of a kind that I'm not sure Figueiredo has ever had.
Yes. And, you know, together with, it was also, you know, it was counter-punching in combination, and that is something which Figueiredo might have done once and certainly doesn't really do that much anymore.
Yeah.
Much more of a one-and-done artist. And, I mean, I just don't know, because at every point in this run for Figueiredo, I've been like, well, he ain't going to beat this guy.
And then he just does it, yeah.
And then he just does. Like, he was gonna have a super slow-paced counter-punching fight against Chito Vera. I mean, admittedly, you know, it did reinforce the fact that Chito simply cannot move and punch.
Yeah.
And that he can't defend takedowns. But it also brought home the fact that Figueiredo hits hard enough to hurt even Chito Vera.
Yeah. Although it's unclear what that means necessarily, given the accumulation of damage Vera has taken up to this point. Like, that
is true.
It's possible
that
the jar
chance that, like, that O'Malley fight in particular.
Yeah, the jar was loosened already, basically, and then Figueiredo gets to walk into the kitchen and just pop the lid off.
Yeah. But even Figueiredo's sort of prime self, I would have found trouble in picking him over Petr Yan.
Yeah.
Simply because Yan can outpace him. He's simply a better boxer. He can draw Figueiredo's counters out of him and re-counter them. He can go to the body as effectively or more so than Moreno did.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially a lot of the matchup is like, what if Moreno's right hand didn't suck?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if he still had the jab? What if he was a better low kicker? What if he was a sort of comparable grappler? What if... but he had a right hand, and it was good. And he could also fight, you know, equally well from southpaw.
Mm-hmm.
And the only difference is that I don't think Petr Yan is as durable as Brandon Moreno, because, again, very few people are.
Well, I have another difference, which is build. And I do have questions about this. Petr Yan, I'll get the actual numbers in front of me here. Petr Yan is 5'7", with a 67-inch reach. He is, in fact, 2 inches taller with 1 inch less of reach than Davison Figueiredo. And let's compare Brandon Moreno real quick. Brandon Moreno, 5'7", 70-inch reach. Moreno also fights better longer than Petr Yan. And this is the thing that really stood out to me in Yan's fight with Song Yadong. What is Petr Yan's range game? Suppose that Davison Figueiredo, as he has been doing, is committed to keeping this fight at as long a range as possible so that he can do kicking and maybe and so that when the guy commits, he has to commit so much that he can make either the counter right hand or the counter takedown work. That has really been a lot of Figueiredo's approach here at bantamweight. And I do wonder if it might have some effect. Who is hitting reactive takedowns on Petr Yan? Like when he gets into one of those moments when he has to cover distance, is it not the weakest part of Yan's game is my question? Is his his range tools? Oh, yeah. He has to crash through. Right? And many of his great performances, that's been the turning point in the fight, like Corey Sandhagen. When he was just like, fuck it, I'm going to get hit. I'm just going to have to go through. Now, suppose we take a Petr Yan who has the weakest part of his game being the long-range part, who is also a Petr Yan who was very tentative and hesitant and kind of up and down in terms of activity against Song Yadong following the Dvalishvili fight. Is it possible we get a Petr Yan who feels kind of stranded and aimless at long range? I think that feels possible to me. That we actually get kind of a slow, long-range, indecisive fight for long periods where Figueiredo just isn't willing to commit because he wants Yan to give him an opportunity for a takedown.
I will say I have a lot more trust in Yan's ability to pressure, both in terms of his footwork and his shot selection and his ability to initiate offense himself.
Yeah.
And I do Chito Vera.
Agreed. Yes. And to build off of whatever offense he initiates as well. Way better than Chito.
Yeah. And the Chito fight was a somewhat close run thing until Figueiredo stunned him.
Yeah.
Because the takedown stopped working. Again, not a tremendous sign for Figgy. Chito is not the world's greatest takedown defender.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it basically came down to the fact that he stunned him in round 3. I also don't know if I trust Figueiredo to be able to maintain his gas tank for 5 rounds.
No,
I don't know how much of this style is, him parceling out of fence so that it's as shocking as possible, and how much of it is him, conserving his energy because he thinks he's going to gas.
Right. Yeah, it's very likely it's a bit of both. He is 36 years old. I tend to agree. I think whatever you say about Petr Yan looking hesitant against Song Yadong, he did ultimately find it. Yep. And if you think of even older, very difficult fights like the one with Jimmy Rivera, Yan still found a way to make that a win. He really lost most of that fight. And still found a way to turn that into a win. Davison Figueiredo, on the other hand, was losing almost the entirety of the fight to Cody Garbrandt before taking him down. He was getting tuned up by Cody Garbrandt, who also is not a great range striker, it has to be said. He was bigger than Figueiredo.
That really does have to be said, yes.
He was bigger than Figueiredo, but Cody Garbrandt, who famously never saw a jab he didn't not want to throw. Sorry, I lost my way in that sentence. Cody Garbrandt, the point is not a range fighter himself. And he was still, in a very slow-paced striking battle, landing clearly the better shots on Figueiredo from range. So that also gives me strong reason to pick Petr Yan. But I have concerns. That's all I mean to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm watching Chito versus Figgy, and Yes, Davison looks quite gassed at the end of it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that he would have done well in rounds 4 and 5 if there had been a round 4 and 5.
Yeah, and it wasn't exactly a crazy torrid pace as far as Cheeto Vera fights go.
No.
It's a lot of neutralizing on behalf of on Davis and Figueiredo's part.
Yep.
So I think it might be.
So yeah,
this is a 5-rounder, by the way. That has to be pointed out. Main event.
Yeah. It is worth reiterating that Jan not one of the many fighters who's been blessed with immortal durability.
Yeah.
It's that we're not taught he's not a Max Holloway, he's not a John Jones, he's not a Cheeto Vera. And Figueiredo is if not the biggest, then at least top 2 in his weight class, and that is merely because he shares it with another incredible pound-for-pound puncher in John Dodson.
Yeah.
But anyway, an absolutely nuclear hitter who has knockdown ratios which were comparable to Francis Ngannou's.
Yeah.
And so it is possible that Jan just gets slapped, even though he's never been slapped before.
That's true.
Because we've seen him dropped a bunch of times, including by the aforementioned John Dodson.
That's true.
A much more washed version of John Dodson than
this
version of Figueiredo.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah, he recovers very well. I mean, he's still hard to hurt, Petr Yan. You really got to get hit with a perfect shot to hurt him, and he recovers well. But yeah, we know he can be hurt. That is certainly possible.
Yeah, there's certainly room for the implausible Figueiredo bantamweight train to keep rolling.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see it as being likely in any way.
No, I just think Jan is too comprehensive a fighter, and I think as bad as he can look and has looked in many of his recent fights, he will settle in to a fight and come up with answers progressively as the bout goes on. And that is not something that can be said of Garbrandt, Cheeto, even to an extent the last iteration of Moreno that Figueiredo fought. I mean, he has not fought a lot of great problem solvers. And so he has been able to trounce them with a really, what looks like a very thin sort of one or the other kind of proposition.
Yeah, and, in fights like... the Dvalishvili fight for Jan is obviously completely non-replicable by literally anyone else.
Yeah, that was the thing though that also alarmed me watching the fight with Song Yadong is how oversensitive he was to the takedown threat. And I'm like, buddy, this is not Merab. Merab can't hurt you here. Nobody can do what Merab does. Literally, you're okay.
Yes,
but it still affected him, and you could see it. He was anxious.
Notably, Figgy either has to land... He has to, hurt Jan in at least 2 rounds, and then, get significant top control on him in another one. But, the takedowns will stop working very quickly, I suspect, much as they did against Cheeto.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just has to be can he really find single clean counterpunches that win him rounds multiple times against Petr Yan?
Right.
And I just can't really see it happening.
No.
Maybe it does. I honestly think it's more likely that he just sleeps him.
Yeah. Or possibly, hurts him and submits him or something. Yeah, something like that.
I think it's more likely that he finishes him outright
than that he wins 3 rounds.
Actually win 3 rounds, yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Because Jan, once he gets in there and he's just fighting, and once he's stopped a couple of takedowns, a level of confidence and also, I'm going to say, annoyance is just going to come back into his game.
Mm-hmm.
He's just going to be get this idiot out of here.
That's the point he needs to reach. He reached it with Song too. He just has to get pissed off.
Yep.
Not fearful, but just mad that you're not winning yet.
Yep.
And then he'll make it happen.
And I think he probably will.
Yeah.
In some ways, I kind of hope he will, because it would be kind of sad to see it end like this.
Oh, it really would. Yeah, as much sort of vicarious resentment as I had towards Piotr Jan at one point, mostly due to dealing with his fans, which is always such an unfair way to decide how you feel about a fighter, but it's kind of unavoidable. As much as I did feel at one point like, man, I want to see Piotr Jan lose so that these losers can eat it, I like Piotr Jan. Piotr Jan is a great fighter, and it's super exciting and a really unique fighter. And I would really hate to see him get dusted by a 36-year-old champ who has really no future left in the sport very soon.
Yep.
So.
Fine.
Okay. Well, I think that is going to have to do it for this week's edition of Heavy Hands. Of course, we will be back next week to talk to you about whatever happens on this Jan Figueiredo card, which also features, by the way, a women's strawweight bout between Yan Xiaonan and Tabitha Ricci, a welterweight bout between Song Qinan and Muslim Salikov. Wong Kong is returning to fight Gabriela Fernandez, and Volkan Oezdemir versus Carlos Ulberg is a genuinely interesting light heavyweight fight that I like. Mm-hmm. And then the week after that, which we will, of course, also be touching on next week, I think, unless there's a Deprestus coming up, Phil.
Ooh. Are we doing the Jesus film?
That would be good. Maybe we should. We've had some really bad fights that are worth watching, but maybe we'll save those. Or maybe we'll have to wait for the Jesus film when we're closer to Christmas. That tends to be bad movie season. We'll bully Zane. We'll get him to watch the Jesus film. Yeah. Anyway, UFC 310, but that's not coming up till December 7th. And it's not a particularly good looking pay-per-view. We'll see what shapes up in the time remaining. Anyway, find us on social media. Phil is on Twitter at Evil Greg Jackson, and I am there at Boxing Bush. I also posted and have been posting more over on Blue Sky. At the very least, there are fewer bots and ads. And there is a growing community of MMA people over there at the moment. Pretty rapidly growing as far as I can tell. So if you want to find me over there, you're more likely to get a reply on fight nights because there's lesser volume and less shit to sift through. And you can find me at kingtypo.bsky.social, but just put at kingtypo, you'll find me. Check out the Patreon. You're going to hear a little more from this episode that did not make the cut. We talked shit about Bo Nickel. We praised Jim Miller. And we also talked a lot more shit about Bo Nickel, actually quite a bit. So head over to Patreon, and in just a couple days now, I will be recording the first of 2 episodes of Heavy Henka, the sumo recap show that I do with Miguel Class. Some big things are happening, as they are every 2 months in the world of sumo, and we're going to talk about the first 7 or 8 days of the November Basho, or tournament, and that should be coming out on the Patreon very soon as well, and then look ahead to the second end of tournament recap episode closer to the end of the month, if not the start of next month. Anyway, that's all at patreon.com/heavyhands. Also, check out my Substack. I wrote a piece about John Jones. I'm writing a silly little thing about Michael Chandler, which I think will be free to read, but that is facepunching.substack.com. Okay, the list of plugs grows long, but we get through it one way or the other. We'll talk to you all next week. Until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.